right, I'm going to go ahead and call the Rules Committee to order. Let's start with introduction, starting with you, John.
John Weddleton.
Make it all go.
Pete Peterson.
Forrest Dunbar.
Suzanne France.
Felix Rivera.
Deanna.
All right. So, first, and actually, I'll hold off on that until a couple other members are in the room. So let's start with, do we have someone on the phone? Okay. Let's start with what the subject that we just ended with, which is the budget. So, of course, there's been a lot of focus on homelessness recently. I know a lot of us have talked about and worked on some other specific issues. I will start this off by bringing up one specific issue with the University of Alaska system that I've been working on with Meg. And then if anyone else has sort of ideas of things that they want to work on in regards to the budget. So we have been reached out to, solicited by some professors and other staff at the University of Alaska system. And based on that input, I got in touch with the chair of the Board of Regents, John Davis, and the student board regent, Miss Gretchen. I think I'm getting her last name wrong. And based on those two conversations that I had, Tuesday, everything's happening on Tuesday, is going to be a pretty significant decision for the Board of Regents. They are going to be taking a vote on what direction they intend to take, whether that's consolidation, whether that's 3 separate universities getting rid of the state administration, or any other combination of things therein. And the message that I have heard repeated again and again and again is that we, being the current existing governing structures within the University of Alaska system, want to weigh in a more formal way. We want to meet with the regents, we want to discuss with them what's going on, and it's very similar to what we did with the port, want to create alignment between all these different parties so that when we move forward, we're making the best decision possible. So to that effect, and after having had conversations with those 2 regents, I have prepared a letter that I will pass around, and I'll just read the bolded part. The rest of it talks about sort of impacts and other things, but the bolded part, the request, is: we urge you to continue leading the university in the strong tradition of UA, thoughtfully and with open communication to the public, and to pause your current deliberations until such times as you are confident that all parties have weighed in effectively. That is the request. You can read the letter and decide if you want to sign on to it or not. I plan on being at the University of Regents meeting on Tuesday. It starts at 9 a.m. at UAA, and presenting them this letter and providing whatever comments I can, although they're not going to be actually allowing public comment because it's an emergency meeting that they're having. So I'll just pass that on. Folks can read it and decide if they want to sign on to it. That's one. Sure, John.
This might be okay, but we had an issue with a letter a couple of years ago where it said resolution, we signed this letter, but that was kind of an open meetings thing because if 6 of it or more than 3 of us sign it, what have we done? So could Dean weigh in? Can we sign a letter that's presented here?
I don't recall the issue 2 years ago. I know there's some issue with the ethics code about me where you're representing that we're speaking on behalf of the Assembly, but the Assembly hasn't actually taken a vote and a position on a particular issue. You need to speak as individual Assembly members. I think this letter is like that. Just as a safety measure, it should have send the same media undersigned in our individual work capacity as individual Assembly members, so that you dissuade any notion that you might be speaking in terms of an official Assembly position or action. Because this is only you as individuals, right? Individual Assembly members, and not the body.
Right, and there is no language in there that suggests that it is the Assembly as a whole speaking. Did you want to add into that,
No,
No?
and
Okay.
also because you can't take formal action in this meeting, so individually would work better.
Yep. Yeah, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we don't think it would be better to do it as a resolution? Because we could lay a resolution on the table Tuesday. Well,
That's the
at
thing, it's
meeting
9
Tuesday.
a.m. is
Okay.
their
All right.
meeting.
All
Yeah,
right.
so this is, I think, the most efficient way for us individually to
Okay.
weigh in on this subject. Yeah, Forrest.
Yeah, I think I've done 2 or 3 of these letters. You know, there was a fairly strong norm against doing political resolutions. I know that Mr. Welton shares in that support of that norm. And I do too. I think we've done a couple of really extraordinary political resolutions in the last couple of years. But before that, and I still, like, I did one that was supporting a particular trail on the Kenai. I did one that had to do with, it was going to Lisa Murkowski for, I can't even remember the issue. And I did like this. I circulated a letter, and I had language in there. So I think that what Dean was saying is you should, I don't know if it's in there yet, Felix, but you might want to include specific language that says, in our individual capacity, or something like that. Yeah. But I was just say, like, I did it a few times, and I think it works pretty well, and it helps us avoid some of the more politically charged resolutions.
So I'm actually going to just keep passing it on. Folks can
Okay.
read it because I don't think we're going to have time to read it. So read it,
Okay.
don't sign onto it. And then, Barbara, could we make that change, please? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, and I'm sorry if you already covered this, but do we have a sense of what the impact would be if they delay this vote on Tuesday?
So the timeline that I discussed with the Board of Regents chair, they have to make their final decision by September. So they have time. And then from September to January 1 is when they'll start rolling all of the changes, and then all the changes take into permanent effect January 1. What the board chair was telling me is basically they're using this week to get informal opinions from everyone. And then in August, after they've already made a directional decision, they will go through and do more formal talking to all the different universities and the community at large and spend that. Instead, I'm asking them to take the opposite route, which is to wait a little bit, do a little bit more formal talking with the current governing structures, then make a directional decision.
Thanks.
Yeah. And this was all sort of on the advice of the current governing structures. They don't feel like they've been allowed to formally weigh in on this process. Okay, so that was just my sort of pet thing in the budget that I wanted to make sure we addressed, particularly because UA is in mechanized districts and will have also impacts in East Anchorage and really throughout the city. But if there are other issues that you'd like to have folks come and talk to us about, just sticking to the UA issue, the UAA governing structures are interested in doing a meet and greet with the assembly so that we can learn more about the potential impacts. So that's something that they did open up to us if we want to do that. We could organize similar things with other specific area issues that we're concerned about based on the budget. So I'm going to open that up, and if you guys are interested, we can organize those things into our schedule. I know we've done plenty of homelessness, so I don't think we need to really add more on that one. Okay. So, yeah,
So
go ahead,
we're-
Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're on B right now, updates and committees and upcoming business. Is that what
We are. I can't even find my actual agenda. So right now, I guess we're technically on C right now.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
You didn't have the committees?
we are. Yeah,
Oh, we jumped, you're saying?
We jumped.
Not done.
Change the order.
yeah, yeah. It's in my thing to do all the updates and everything. We can come back to that where you guys can just email leadership if you think specific things should be discussed. Yeah, Chris.
For a really comprehensive list of who might be reached out to, the EOC has been engaging some conferences with a number of entities, not just homeless providers.
Okay.
We might ask for that list.
Sure. Okay, great. I'll do that. Moving on then. Next on the list of things. So at the last Rules Committee, we had talked about the communications pillar for what we wanted to do. And a lot has happened since then. What I think would be most effective for us to actually having something that can come before the body in a more formal way is if we form a working group on the communications pillar and just formalize within 3 assembly members and whatever other municipal staff we want to work with the different, the vision, the goals, all that kind of jazz. So I'll open it up to anyone interested in joining that working group on the communications pillar. Chris?
I think I'm lost. What's a communications pillar?
So when we had talked about all the different issue areas that we had wanted to work on, public safety, homelessness, we had decided to kick the bucket on the communications part. Yeah. So now this is forming a working group to actually start working on it. Yeah.
And just to add a little flavor to that, Mr. Chair, that's so that we can better communicate all the good things we're doing to the public, because that's the break in the system, I think.
All right, so Chris, Meg, I can entertain one more. First come, first serve. Okay, we'll just leave it at 2. Someone else wants to join. Yeah, Barbara.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer, as some of the assembly members know, Anna Campione is a part-time employee and manages your Facebook. She's the one that got the notice out for the homelessness town hall, for Facebook Live for today, and for both your meeting and the homelessness committee meeting. She makes sure that the agendas are out there. Anna is working on some single-page fact sheets right now. She's working with Ms. Zalatel on one for deconstructing an assembly meeting. She's working with Mr. Weddleton on the plastic bag ban. And I believe Mr. Weddleton, Ms. Zalatel on cell phones in school districts. So as part of your communications group, if you wouldn't mind including Anna Campione in the clerk's office, and we'd be happy to help and coordinate that. We also believe that that's part of the clerk's office mission. If you look at the bottom of our my email, the vision statement for the clerk's office is to connect the assembly, the administration, and the public to each other to improve the democratic process. So we're here to help you with that. It's consistent with our mission.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. All right. So if a third member wants to join that, just let me know. Moving on. So sticking to the theme of budget, I have set aside times this upcoming Monday and Tuesday to meet with the chairs to discuss budget priorities using the goals that we've come up with as a framework. The reason that I'm doing it next week, on Monday, the department heads have a deadline to get in their budgets to OMB and to the mayor. And I think it would behoove us in that same vein for us to get our budget priorities to the administration and communicate that well in advance of the normal routine, which would be us to communicate after the budget is completed, what our priorities are. So it would be much more of a collaborative effort with the administration.
Can you elaborate on that? So you said something about Monday?
Yeah, the department heads are getting their budgets in for next year to OMB on Monday.
And you want us to do the same thing by Monday?
No. So on Monday, no. So on Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to have time set aside, and I'll email everyone and let you guys know now, so that the chairs of the different committees can let me know what their priorities are within their respective committee roles, and also using our goals as a frame, so that I can take that to the administration. Yeah, that's sort of because I feel like we want to get in our priorities along with the different directors and do that same process at the same time.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
So would we then, when are we going to tell you our priorities? Before that or after that?
During that, you would tell me
what
your guys' is.
at the meeting. Or
So
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time getting this, but there's meetings with the administration and department.
no, yeah, sorry, this is confusing. So no, meetings with me to communicate
great.
with the
Okay.
chairs, sort of. Okay, guys, in your committee, health policy, as an example.
Awesome.
What are your guys' budget priorities? And then I meet regularly with the administration with 8th floor, so then I will be the conduit of all your guys' priorities to them. Yeah, Chris.
So, this is a good step forward. I would recommend for the future then, if this actually is happening in July, because I understood it was going to happen in August, that the committees actually be asked a month in advance of this time for the whole committees to deliberate that question, so that it's not just the chairs, but it's actually the committee voice. And so, while it's a remarkable step forward that we're going to have some say in the pre-budget process, for next year, let's build it a year back or a month back, so that the committees in June contemplate what do we want for the next year.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think having more leadway would be excellent for us to be more formal in our recommendations. Yeah, Austin.
How does the process we did with Lori, it's sort of, evaluating and identifying our priorities and then talking about how we get there. I know your intent was to do that in time to make it inform our budget process.
Right.
How does that fold into this? And do we need to revisit? Do we talk as a group about that?
Yeah, so right now, because the timely factor is the budget, I am just sticking to that one piece right now, is focusing. We have drafts, in sort of very draft forms, what our goals and vision and priorities are. Use those drafts to inform the budget priorities we want to make. And then after that piece, which I think is priority right now, then we can come back and circle and sort of finalize what those thoughts are.
Before August or something? Or before
It would likely be
November?
in August
Okay,
that we
cool.
do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, any other thoughts on that? Okay, so like I said, Chair.
Would you want us to follow up then, or is the intent, if we communicate budget priorities to you as the chairs, for us to report those back out in our committee meetings? I mean, that would make sense, so everyone's aware and we can kind of red flag if something got missed or overlooked.
I think in August, and again, going back to Chris's comment, right, it would have been great if we had done this before, but August can be used as the, okay, this is what we communicated to the administration. Did we miss anything? Do we want to add anything? Because I think we'll still have time in August, but I think the timeliness right now is getting it to them next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I won't go through the dates and times, but Monday and Tuesday, I'll send you guys some specific times. They would be meeting in the 2nd floor conference room. Awesome, thank you. All right, so I'm just going to pass this second version around, which specifically designates that the undersigned assembly members are working in our individual capacity on this letter.
So the text is the same. If I review this, the text is the same.
Text is the same, but just that
Says
one.
at the end.
All right.
Did you want us to sign this one?
That's the one that you can sign, yes. And if you so choose, I'm not going to force it. All right, so quick update on a couple other things before I turn it over to everyone else, roundtable. So, Dean, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but last Rules Committee meeting, we had talked about collaboration and how Dean can help us out with that. So Dean is working on that and should have, by next Rules Committee meeting, a proposal to us so that we can more effectively collaborate within ourselves, and it's not as much of a headache. Second is I have been working with Assembly leadership, Ms. LaFrance, Ms. Jones, on a P&P on communication with the administration. The administration has their own P&P that they use, although they don't really follow it, I think, on how to communicate. And with us being as busy as we are now, I think it would behoove us to have some type of procedure that we follow when we talk with the administration so that we get the best information possible. And that, well, I don't want to delve too much into it now, but that's basically talking to the directors versus talking to staff members who maybe have more of a limited view of what might be happening. And so we'll be formalizing or having the discussion on that soon. That's just something that's in the works.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
That, to me, raises some red flags.
Okay.
I personally imagine that while it's convenient for everybody to have restrictions on the bandwidth of who and how we communicate, I intend to ensure in this deliberation or debate of policies and procedures that we are allowed as full and free and flexible a stream of communication with this whomever on the staff we need to understand, even if it is just part of the story. So as long as these are guidelines and not restrictions, I'm okay. But I would resist any idea that I can't go talk to whomever I need to.
Sure. Thank you for that. Yeah, this isn't draft. We'll have, I think, a final version next month, hopefully, to deliberate at this committee. Any other thoughts on that? Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess I have a thought. And just bringing a perspective from my experience on the school board. So I know it's different in lots of ways, but just I wanted to share this, that we had on the school board, when I was chair of the school board, we had some real challenges with members of the school board who were, because of how they engaged with either people as a part of the administration or people who were, throughout the system, teachers and others, that it went beyond information gathering and into something that was actually becoming detrimental to the district. And so there was an effort to try to establish some guidelines so that there was at least open communication about it. If you're going to go and do X, let X know, so that there was some kind of open communication about it. There was a great deal of resistance because people felt like you're limiting my ability to do the job that I want to do. So there was a real debate about that, about how do you function in a way that is responsible and in line with what we're ultimately trying to do, but create the amount of freedom. The other thing that happened was that because there was so much concern about some of those actions becoming detrimental, that actually policies went into place for the body to take actions on members who were doing that so much that there was some recourse for the body to say da 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 da. So I just wanted to share that it was a whole year-long process. But that debate about to what extent should you have access to anyone however you want, and to what point the body decides that there is a limit to that, or at least some guidelines, so that it's done in a way that ultimately accomplishes what we're trying to accomplish. So I just want to share that as a
Thank you. Yeah, Forrest.
So I appreciate what Cameron is saying, and I think that I'll be interested to see what the actual proposal is, if there is one. I will say that I think there's a categorical difference between the assembly and the school board. I agree. And what it is you guys hire the superintendent, right? And so in theory, you basically have control over everyone in that chain of command, because you can fire the person at the top. Not the case here. We're a co-equal branch of government, and the administrative employees could tell us to go pound sand at any time. They don't report to us, they report to the mayor, and the mayor is elected himself. Now, they wisely don't do that very often, because we're all in this together, and because we control their budget. But I do think that additional level of protection they have, being able to go to the mayor, and the mayor being able to come to us in a way that the superintendent can't in the same way, and tell them, like, hey, knock it off. I think that helps alleviate some of that issue.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
My relationships with the employees of this municipality are some of the most valuable assets I have in all the work I'm doing. And, it will be from my cold, dead fingers you pry my relationships and my direct reports that I have with friends and associates that are running the city at any level. Because I tell you, that's where the magic happens. It's not on the 8th floor, and it's certainly not through the chair restricting or us saying you cannot or cannot talk. So
cool.
That'll be an interesting debate.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. All right.
Don't take his magic fingers.
What's that?
Moving on. All right. So before we do round table, is there any open discussion topics that we want to have? Just open it up to the body if there's anything. So this isn't like your specific things that you're working on. This is just something that you want the opinion of the entire body on. Yeah, Meg.
I would love an AMATS 101 training. So I'm not aware of one if one is coming up, but I just wanted to toss that out there. It's come up a couple of times, and I need some education.
Okay.
So head to
I
that
see
training
Desiree
is
today.
abandon hope, all you who entertain.
Fear the grid.
Yeah, fear the grid is another one. There's a lot of that one's hot.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Anything else?
One short one.
Yeah.
Has there been a discussion in the past about instituting a requirement for land acknowledgement as part of assembly meetings? Is that like we do the pledge? Has there been a discussion about establishing that as a permanent and required part of opening assembly meetings?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would have to say we never talked about that specifically, but I certainly had that thought this week, and it's something that I would like to explore. And I'm not sure what the ramifications are, but it's wise, and so.
I think no is the answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have.
But we're interested.
I've had a conversation with a number of members of the local tribe, and so that just wanted to throw that out there. I didn't know if there had already been work done on that, or if there was.
Yeah.
The thought I had was the verbal acknowledgement is good, but also maybe somewhere on the actual agenda itself. Like every time it's printed, it could say something in one of the somewhat.
Thanks. Yeah, no problem. All right, seeing no. Oh, Dean, do you have something?
The code has that, section about the agenda's pledge of allegiance in there. Also, that's all important.
It's for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes.
But not for sort of in indigenous land acknowledgement.
So it's,
Yeah, go ahead.
Dean, is it code and not charter? Does charter lay out any of that kind of stuff, or is it just code?
This is in the code. I don't think the charter says anything about that, but I have to double check.
Yeah, awesome.
I was just going to offer that I think it's a great idea. We're currently working on an update to Title II, right? There's some titles, but which includes the agenda. So we could change it to say Pledge of Allegiance and Indigenous Land Acknowledgement, and we could just do that at each meeting if there's appetite for that.
Well, it'd be great to have the tribe make a recommendation of that language so that it comes from.
I bet the language itself, Felix, correct me if I'm wrong, or B, but I don't think that language probably has to be code, but we could codify that we do such an acknowledgement in the agenda, because if the code lays out what the order of the agenda is and what the titles are, and then we could, as a body or through you bringing it as an A or whatever.
The only worry I would have is if you just say do it, then you can do it in any way you want to do it. So in next administrations and that sort of thing, it could not be done in a way that's actually in line with the way that the tribe would prefer it. And so that's my only caveat is that figuring out a way to get some what in your case, yes, just put in land acknowledgement, but in another case, finding what that language would be, just like Pledge of Allegiance, you can't do it any way you want. There's one way to do it, and you got to do it that way.
Thank you.
Do you think, Dee, that we would lay out what the language of the land acknowledgement is in Title II, or would it be better to do that in another?
It could just be in a separate code provision.
Okay.
It would be helpful to figure out that language.
So it's a separate code, where would it be in the code?
I'm not sure, but I don't think it needs to be in the agenda language other than the reference to it.
Got it, okay.
Chris?
Yeah, just, this kind of verges into other legislation ideas. But just this week, I started a conversation with Aaron at Equipment Chief, and have engaged with few members in the process of looking at ways we can establish a formalized relationship with equipment in the code. And this conversation is just at its very beginning, and it's probably going to span the course of a year of conversation and dialogue. But just stand by for that, because this is an area that some effort is starting to go in.
Thank you, Chris. Dean, did you have something to add? Okay. Chris, did you have anything else? We'll go ahead and just start the round table.
Other than that, I would like to join forces with Mr. France on the tobacco, the vape excise tax. So I would like to get that moving and unified.
Is there anyone else working on it? Just you two? Yeah.
Well, actually, I think that's a good discussion for us. I mean, what's the best way to proceed? And I know we have Emily Neenan here. In our discussions when we were working the Tobacco 21 ordinance, putting that one through first, then addressing taxes, and possibly even taking on the issue of flavors when it comes to e-cigarettes, similar to the legislation that Senator Murkowski has put forward, maybe something also we want to address. But I would like to know, I mean, Chris, what is the best venue to work this? Is it through the budget committee because it's tax? Is it for the administration to work it out? Or should we hash it out in the health policy committee, or where does it belong?
So if I might, I have an email string with several people engaged in the conversation on the staff level, and what I would suggest is that before we answer that question here, that everyone acknowledge that work has begun. You and I sit down with those members of the staff and have a conversation about how they envision it working, and then we bring it back. It could be here or to a committee that we choose or recommend, or we could do it at the assembly, say this is what we plan to do, and hope to be engaged in this process. So that's what I would suggest, is let's sit down with the staff and get their 2 cents before we create a formal process.
Okay, and I know Mr. Dunbar's in the queue,
Yeah.
but
Do you have something else?
well, I just wouldn't want to cut off anyone else who's been working on it, because I know you had taken it up a year ago, and I know Austin and John also were looking at it, and maybe others. So I'm open to whatever, and my name doesn't necessarily need to be on it, whatever's the best way to report, but I'm happy to work with you on that, Chris.
Yeah, Forrest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, to me, the ideal outcome here would be, and we've seen this with some of the other more complicated tax proposals that have tax proposals have a lot of sort of back office stuff that needs to happen with them, the collection, that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to think. I think they've all been from the administration. So what I'm suggesting is if you have that conversation with staff and you have a conversation with leadership, ideally what would happen is there would be an ordinance from the mayor, and then it could be heard in the health policy committee and the budget committee, I think. Not to slow it down, but just so, and then have a bunch of us sign on to it. And that's how you avoid the Open Meetings Act.
Of course.
Sounds
As
great.
well. That's what I just described. We'll sit down, powwow with the administration, figure out the best strategy, and then we'll bring it forward to whatever flow it needs to go through. So it absolutely comports with your recommendation.
But we can't. I mean, obviously, we can't force the health department or the mayor to put forward an ordinance. But I think that I'm hoping that they would.
There's a whole team of people already on board with this conversation. I just did on Tuesday night that there are multiple efforts, and so now is the time to unify them. If anyone else wants, we have room for one more.
Well, no, I think what Forrest is suggesting is that we're not just doing 3. We're actually bringing it to the administration, working with them, and then having as many people who want to sign on as we can.
And what I'm saying is that we will start with either the 2 of us or the 3 of us. We'll work with the panel on the administration I have, and they will do exactly what was just described, that it will be handed out to everybody. Would you like to join? And this is the process we'd like to report. Because I'm not waiting for the administration. I'm driving the administration to do that.
Do I hear Mr. Trainee?
Oh.
The ghost of Mr. Trainee's past.
Yes, I don't know. I think we're talking about the same thing and the same process. Just in the short term, we have room for one more if one wants to come up with it.
Yeah, Dean, then Forrest.
Yeah, I guess it's funny somebody mentioned Mr. Trinity. I was just thinking of him as well. Then motor fuel tax. Mr. Trinity first drafted, Aston's draft, motor fuel excise tax, and bring it forward. The administration said that they wanted to co-sponsor, but Mr. Trinity started that drafting the document first. So I can see collaboration. You can start collaborating. You can start with the proposal. If the administration wants to join in, or because the administration start, we could go in those routes, I think. So
If you just give me 1 minute, I'll tell you the large.
I would like to ask, you said there was only Mr. Constance, a group working team in the administration side. Who's leading that?
I think the short answer is yes. Forrest?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Do we have any legal mechanism to add Mr. Trainee as an honorary?
Okay, so,
Special guest.
Put 'em in
You
the
could be
where-
listed, you could be
You put them in the whereases,
Yeah.
as suggested by former Assemblymember training. I'm serious.
yeah,
I think
so
so.
you are already in the conversation on my end, including Mr. Francis. She was simultaneously working with Ms. Ennis, Mr. Sherwood, and Dean Gates, and myself, and now I know Suzanne. And so that's the beginning working group. That conversation was 2.5 weeks ago.
So that's, yeah, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's a bunch of lawyers, not that there's anything wrong with lawyers.
Well, and Chris and Suzanne. Oh, I thought, okay, I see what you mean.
No, I mean from the
administration.
administration.
Yeah.
Is there some way to get Ms. Pineda?
Gademus was one that has been listed to be included in the conversation. The Health Department, taxman, I think it was Jack. Assessor.
Oh,
Maybe.
the assessor.
No, I mean, it's
Dan.
probably
Wasn't
Dan
him.
Moore is probably
It
the
was
guy.
Dan, yeah.
Dan Moore and,
That was
and
it.
yeah, Dan Moore and Natasha Pineda would be the two that I would.
Here's the quote. I think the best way to get this going would be to have a meeting with Dee, Dean, him, a couple folks from the Treasury, Dan Moore. They have experience,
Yeah.
and that there's some national standards that we can look to. I think it's important to define exactly what we want to tax, because research shows there are a number of products, et cetera, et cetera. So they want to also include ASD in the conversation because they're seeing actual use of vape products, even though they're now banned from sale. And so, yes, very broad and far-reaching beginning.
All
Could
right.
I-
Dee, then Austin.
Actually, Suzanne, I'd love to volunteer for your communication bucket, because I think you could tell me this, you're interested in this, and I could say, these are the 4 or 5 people you should contact, and or I can contact them, say they have this idea, and so I can be your liaison instead of you were trying to get people to come.
Yep, great.
I was just gonna say, ask Emily
Yeah.
if she's interested, because we've had conversations, John and Suzanne and I have with her, and I think you bring some expertise to what's been happening nationally. Is that a working group you would want to be part of, or you or your organization?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
And for the record, Emily Neenan, American Cancer Society Cancer Action.
To begin with, I would like to keep it tight and narrow until we get our path forward, and then we will branch and branch and branch.
Just on the UAA to not be tied. It's broad.
Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne.
Though I would say, Chris, that including Emily from the get-go does keep it tight and narrow because we don't want to go off in the wrong direction in ways that, you've seen, as Austin pointed out, what's worked in the lower 48 and other communities. So I would make an argument to include her from the get-go.
Thank you. All right. You guys can hash that out
Okay.
offline. Anything else, Chris? Okay. Thanks. What you got, Austin?
What am I supposed to be?
We're doing just roundtable. Sorry, roundtable on anything that we have coming up, any legislation, draft ordinances, that kind of stuff.
I think you guys are, I could give an update on the Title II. We've been meeting weekly. Dee, Quincy, Barbara, a couple other people, Dean and I, Sadie, and we've made a lot of progress on the assembly procedures. We identified about 7 maybe priorities of things we wanted to make changes to, and we've come up with language, I think, for 2 of them that we're still finalizing. So we had a discussion last week, or I guess it was this week, of should we bring that as a full package, or should we introduce individual ordinances that change pieces? We felt like even though it takes longer, that it makes sense to introduce a comprehensive package so we can make sure to evaluate how the different changes impact each other. Is that okay with this body? I mean, it's going to take a month or 2 because we're kind of slogging through individual changes that might impact another thing. And is that okay?
Yeah.
So we've been working on that.
Great. Thank you. What you got, John?
Well, a couple of things tying in with that, working with Sadie and others on how we handle quasi-judicial things and where ex parte requirements kick in and so on. And I think we're pretty far. We meet with 2 more twice next week. We got to get them for Sadie Bowles.
Yeah, what are we going to do when Sadie leaves?
Well, there's electronics. We keep her in touch. So,
Can you work full-time remotely?
So we're working on that, and that's I think it'd be very helpful. I mean, coming from Planning and Zoning Commission, it was like it was very clear what we would do, and I think it would give us good guidance. A couple things. Speaking of AMATs, and AMATs, for those who don't know, is a little different than the way things operate. That's the group that allocates the city's federal highway funds and a few other things. But there's 2 assembly members on it, but the assembly doesn't really have say in most of that. Assembly is advisory to that committee. So it's a little different than other committees. But a couple of things I've been working on, you've heard, is changing the way we score projects when we get a list of projects so that it's more focused on our community needs, not just moving cars fast. There's some new requirements of FHWA. We're having a work session on, I think, about 10 days on the 7th, about performance measures. And I'm not exactly sure. We have those now, but there's FHWA is looking for some new things. And I think it opens up the door towards getting some of this scoring stuff redone a little sooner.
Mr. Weddleton, what was that you're saying?
Performance
No,
measures?
Before that. Who's meeting?
Oh, AMATs?
No.
That acronym.
FHWA, Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you.
And another issue is match money for federal highways. We have to pay almost 10%. It's quite a bargain to do most projects. But parts of Anchorage, like the hillside, is in the AMATS area. Girdwood and Turnagain aren't. Girdwood is. Parts that are outside of ARDSA don't have an easy way to get matching money for projects. And on the hillside, we've got a lack of roadway connections, so developable land can't be developed without 2 egresses beyond 30 units. How do you get the match for that? There's also, for Firewise purposes, sometimes very small connections, but the way it's set up there with limited road service areas, even if it's a $50,000 connection, that's huge for LRSA. And then if we could use AMAT's money, we don't even have the $5,000 for match out of the LRSA. So we're looking at ways to come up with that match. And there's also not just dealing with that, but if it's a plan, where do you get the match for that? And we've got like the transportation demand management study for the Elmore Road extension at UAA or whatever. We're having trouble coming up with a match for that study. So we're looking at ways we can deal with that. We also have, we're looking at the MTP 2040, which is a long-range plan, and projects in there are the ones that come into play in the TIP. And a really big deal is this midtown congestion relief. Okay, what do we do to our city? Across the country, they're taking down these split grade projects, and what are we doing? And in that way, when we're right in the heart of the city. So you need to be very attentive to that, but it gets hidden deep in the weeds and little charts and graphs. It's very hard to keep up on this stuff. There's also,
that's why we have you, Mr. Weddleton. Great job.
I really enjoy it, but it is very complex. It's tough to get things going. So, and I really appreciate being on that committee, and that I've been left to that. It's very much something to do. We are looking at the CDC meeting next Thursday. The interesting thing is snow dumps, and this is something Chris Schutte brought up, but it is an issue in this town. As we have less snow dumps, it gets more and more expensive to haul our snow. And there's high requirements on creating a snow dump because of water quality rules. So we'll be learning more about that if you're interested.
So we're closing dumps because we have
private
less
dumps
snow?
in particular. No, there's just, as there's less up, we have to haul the snow further. So,
but there are fewer dumps now. They're closing.
Yeah, there's a lot of private ones are closed. Or private.
Awesome. Thanks,
Can
John.
I add something?
Oh, yeah, sure, go
forgot
ahead.
to mention that Suzanne and I, and Chris couldn't make it this morning, but he might join us next time. We met with, for those of you who were here on Friday, we had a discussion about the animal control Title 17 changes. And so we had our first working group meeting this morning, and we're focusing on the shelter piece that we discussed. We haven't yet gotten to the bond, and we also did talk a little bit about Mr. Dyson's suggestions, which of that was involved in drafting. So anyway, we're working through that. I just want to let you guys know that. And Mr. Wilson and I will meet on the consideration of ranked choice voting.
Are there only 2 of you doing that?
For the animal thing?
For ranked choice voting?
Yeah, you want to join us?
Yes, please.
Great.
Go ahead.
Forrest, you're
Okay.
free for now. We try to get Forrest to do it.
So I have 2 primary things. This isn't necessarily legislation right now, but it's a conversation happening about potential creation of a Midtown Improvement District or something similar to guide Midtown, and we'll see where that goes. Just throwing it out there if anyone has really great interest in something like that, if you're not in Midtown, because
Mr. Weddleton probably doesn't.
okay, great. See, this is what this is for. It's throwing it out there. And then on overflow shelter,
We moved forward with, we're working on that ordinance, Chris Cameron and myself. But then there's a phase 2 that's coming, and I think you can hear Mr. Constant kind of alluding to it, which is shelter licensing and regulation. There are 3 of us working on it, but just a little bit of an update on where it's at, just so you can kind of put your head around it. I met with Development Services, and they kind of provided a framework they would like to move through, which would be a little bit of a hybrid of using Planning and Zoning Commission, like a conditional use permit, but maybe it won't be a conditional use permit. We may be creating something new within Title 21. Is that the right title? I hope it is. And then now working on how to, on that recommended structure, putting the substance in there. So the idea is to hopefully broaden where shelters can be, not just in PLI, like we could maybe have them in others. Because, and Sadie's done fantastic research on the issue and gotten us a bunch of really fantastic background information on that, so that we really have a good foundation to move forward with those additional discussions. That's it.
Thank you. Pete?
Well, we are looking for a date. It might possibly be sometime on the 7th between the Public Safety Committee meeting and the AMATS work session to have a special meeting of ethics and elections to take another look at the appointment member legislation that we've been working on. And Barbara seems to have some more information about that.
Mr. Chair, as far as the ranked choice voting and appointment, that is Ms. Quinn Davidson. I know you've got a lot of things before you at the Ethics and Elections Committee, and Ms. Quinn Davidson wants to meet with Mr. Weddleton and Matt Farina. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So they will not be ready to come before you until later in August. However, the clerk's office did ask for a special meeting of the Ethics and Elections Committee because we had so many ordinances before you in August, and because Emma has worked very hard on the AO that is proposing some date changes in elections. And so we would like to come before you for those real simple date changes if the committee would be willing to meet early. And part of the reason for that is Emma is the driver on it, and we'd like her to be there at least to present the final draft to the committee, possibly to attend a work session. I think she's going to have to listen telephonically for the assembly meeting. That'll just allow us to get it introduced and before you. One of the things that we think is important, and the reason we want to get this before you, we were talking about the piecemeal legislation. We're talking about changing the dates for filing for office and for presenting propositions. And we want to get that to you and approved as soon as possible if that's something that Assembly is willing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Chris?
So on that note, I've separately been working with Dee and looking at doing some legal research on changing the qualifications to run for office. Two, specifically, one would restrict if you're an executive appointee at a certain level of the state government that you can't serve on a municipal assembly. So if you answer directly to the governor, he can fire you. That you can't sit on either the school board or the assembly, so that the governor can't influence our business. And at the same time, opening more positions within the municipality to run for state office, because there are certain restrictions on people that say you can't. If you're a municipal employee, you can't be in the legislature. And so less than executive, it seems like there might be a reason why they could. The school board has already been granted an exemption to do that, which is interesting. And so I'm hopeful if we're going to be doing something that changes the dates and deals with the structure of our elections, that this item is addressed in advance of that.
John?
Were you working with Shimsheimer on that?
I haven't talked to him at all.
Okay, I'll forward you some stuff.
Okay.
He reached out to me as well.
He did?
Mark Schimsheimer and another person in my district the person in my district was a lower level AWO employee.
Right.
He was prevented from running for the school board.
Right.
So Was that?
He's not voting.
No, not Schimsheimer, someone else.
Yeah, and so I want to tackle
yeah.
addressing this question in a structured way.
Well,
Dean
lower
has
than
been working on
deputy.
waiting for some responses back from, I think, APOC, and so it's an emerging piece.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would say probably coordinate on those efforts because they seem pretty similar to me. Anything else, Pete?
No, that's good.
Thanks, Forrest.
Yeah, I was supposed to get coffee with Mark Schimsheimer and the gentleman from AWU about that issue. You say you're working with D or with D?
D.
Okay, so I'll send you an email about that, D, after I have that coffee. Because I share the similar logic. I think it's we can do both at once. We can restrict people at the very top, and we can expand it for people that are not at the very top. And I think that's more equitable. Most of my summer has been spent taking an online military justice course, and that's going really well for anyone to know. And hopefully in December I'll be in Virginia doing the residency portion of that. But I recently reached out to Dean about on-site consumption, about the smoking portion of on-site consumption, and finding a way to send that to the voters in a fashion that wouldn't be an advisory vote, but they actually would be deciding whether or not we have smoking on-site consumption. And it's not super pressed for time. We have until January to get that on the ballot, but I'd like to get it out, get the language ready, and get it out sooner rather than later.
John.
That's a really complicated issue that I worry won't work well on a vote, because some people draw a line. It's impossible because they'll get some small little particle of smoke. In fact, even with our current rules where you can't have smoking in a workplace, there are bars that have smoking areas that are legal. And how could you craft that for on-site for marijuana? You probably could some way, but that's fairly, as we know, things get very complex. And things that go to the voters need to be crystal clear. That yes and that no need to be absolutely clear. This is a spectrum and it's muddy.
Well, I think for me, and I'll work with Dean on this, my goal is to make it as simple as possible. And we already set up the on-site consumption, and we set up specifically in a way where you could insert smoking. And so try to alter the code as little as possible for the ballot question. But the overall question is, should we have this or not? And then it'll be up to us to write a much more detailed code, likely afterwards. But for me, that initial, because there is a smoking ban that got 73% approval, there has been a plebiscite on this exact issue, I think it's worth going back to the people and asking them again and inserting it. But I share your concern, and I definitely will try to make it as simple as possible. And I think when people are voting, they'll in their mind be thinking, ideally, should we or should we not allow, certain on-site consumption, smoking, in marijuana shops? That'll be the question.
Maybe we should help forest fires.
If I may add, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
It's true what Mr. Watson said. It would be complicated in terms of how we're amending code to allow on-site consumption by smoking information. You don't need to present that in the ballot question. You can present an informative summary, exactly what the effect of this question, yes, no, is going to be, with reference to an ordinance that does amend code. I've seen this done in the past, and the important part was making sure that the summary is accurate and specific and non-partisan in the way it presents the information and what's going to happen if you vote yes or no. So we can do it that way, and that's the way I would recommend to read it. You might see that some propositions set out language specifically. The charter, if you have a charter amendment, requires that language to be set out specifically as being changed, but not if it's just a code amendment. So, that's what.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Forrest. Thanks, John. Suzanne.
Thanks, Felix. Mr. Chair, Felix and I are meeting Wednesday with members of the administration to go over the revised pawnbroker ordinance, which hopefully we'll be able to introduce in the next few weeks. And then I'm not sure if maybe you want to put it on the Public Safety Committee agenda at some point.
That'd be an interesting topic for us. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other issue that came up is apparently we have a gap in code when it comes to standards for wharfs and trestles. And
Don't do this.
are you sure? Well, this came up in the context.
Could you say that word again, Ms. McGuns? What is the
wharfs and trestles?
Works?
Wharfs.
WH.
In the context of the port, and Title 23,
Thank you.
governing vertical structures, and Title I land use. Apparently, there are some loose ends in Title 11 when it comes to standards. And so this is a question to the body. I mean, I would like to follow up on this. It may fit best in your committee, John, or sounds like, Forrest, you may have already given this some thought and decided it's...
I have not given it.
Okay.
My impression is it would require a hell of a lot of technical engineering knowledge, but,
Well, we have the Geotechnical Advisory Commission and other experts. Anyway, so yeah, I guess the question would be, is that something, John, that would belong in you and Crystal's committee, or should I go ahead and talk to Chris Schutte and then?
Probably the closest fit. We're the and that's the building we meet where all those people are.
Mm-hmm.
So we certainly start there. My guess is pretty quick we start with the work sessions or send it to commission instead of geotechnical or whatever the
Port commission as well.
Port commission. Yeah.
Okay.
But is this what's the like? Gosh, this needs to be done before we vote on Monday. Or?
No, I mean, you've gone without standards so far.
Very low
Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I guess I meant, it's still going to be designed to publish CE standards, even though it's not called out specifically for wharfs and trestles in the code. But it just would be good to tie up that loose end. Can you erase that first part?
Strike that.
I am kidding, Mr. Haberman.
He's still right there.
He's right.
There is no digging out of this one. Okay.
This will be reflected in this report.
It's a more informal setting, correct, Felix?
Yes.
Remember,
Anyway.
it's just a statement. It's
Okay.
not a policy.
So maybe I'll go ahead and copy you, John, on an email to Chris to get that discussion going. But just, to reiterate.
Where did this originally, the whole issue?
With a conversation with Sharon Walsh.
Okay.
So I will include her as well.
Anything else, Suzanne?
No, this looks shifts.
All right. Cameron.
I have nothing to add.
Okay.
They're all ears.
All right.
I actually have one item I forgot to mention.
Sure.
And it's short-term, introduced today, will be on the agenda for introduction and voting in 2 weeks. You remember we did a reconsideration change, change reconsideration rules. There was one really common sense change that wasn't on the table, and the problem reared its head again at our meeting on Tuesday, and that was with the purchase, if the PCT vote goes forward, the timing and how if a reconsideration was filed, it could throttle that whole process. And the code currently reads at the next regular meeting, which means one of the previously noted meetings that's on the calendar every twice a month. And so the ordinance I drafted with Ms. with Pearson just simply strikes out the word regular and reads now, if passed, the next meeting, which would allow a majority to convene that night, the next day, whenever needed to be done, instead of waiting 2 more weeks in order to hear the question. And so you'll see that in the packet, and that's coming forward post haste.
Thanks, Chris.
How long time? We can't even talk about it. We have to have something.
We can meet within 2 days, I think. What's the notice requirements for a special meeting?
24 hours.
24 hours. We can meet real quick. And so as soon as that notice of reconsideration gets filed, the chair could schedule another meeting in a day. And, I was, again, the worst offender at this with that marijuana license. We figured out the loophole, ran right through it. But it's really problematic when you contemplate the ballot and certification of elections and other items where a wrench could be thrown right into the middle of important procedures by just 2 people. And so, but it's literally striking one word out of 4 places, the same word, and it changes everything. So stand by for that other issues.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I actually do have a
sure.
a comment,
Go ahead.
and I'm not sure, so correct me if I'm out of line. It's regarding the meeting on Tuesday and the decision that's in front of us regarding the port, and the meetings that are going on between the administration and user groups, and just in terms of that communication and how that's all happening and how that information is either coming to us or not. And it was clear at our last meeting that the votes weren't there to move forward based at that time. And so I'm curious. Process-wise, I would assume that what's happening is that we're all sort of waiting, and then whatever we hear on Tuesday, we're using that to have the conversation moving forward. But I guess I just wanted to share that that I don't have a sense at this point of where we as a body stand there, and where the user group stands, and what it will take for them to shift or us to shift, one way or the other. And so I guess I'm a little curious about that, and I'm curious of whether there is information that can come to us or to them prior to that meeting that will help to inform whatever the decisions that we're going to make, so that we're ready to be at a place of saying, this is where I'm at. So I know that sounds a little vague, but I'm literally leaving to go to Seward, and I think other people are probably having a weekend, right? And I'm going to show up on Tuesday, and I'm not sure I have any more information today than I did at that meeting, and so just want to give a heads up.
And I would say that probably most of us don't have more information. I think there are some of us who have met with port groups, so maybe they want to share something. Chris?
Well, I don't have any specifics towards where they are or whoever is where, but I can assure you that there have been about 4 meetings in the last 2 days between the administration and users, and they continue to move forward. And so they are all negotiating in what appears to be good faith towards a common goal. We'll see if anything breaks by Tuesday. In advance of that, it's status quo until we have more information.
And I did have a conversation with some of the administration, and I shared that one of my main concerns is this lack of alignment, and that moving forward without a greater alignment between the administration, the assembly, and the user group concerns me greatly, because it sets us up to have a really difficult path forward. And so my hope is that the work that's happening between the administration and the user group are moving closer in that vein. And it's, for me, less about technical issues at this point, because I've read all the information, I have all of that stuff. It's more about that piece. So I'm hoping that that's at the heart of many of those conversations that they're having.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Karen, I'd recommend checking in with Jason before you leave.
Yeah, I've already had a conversation.
As of you should check in with Jason before you leave.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So, I talked to him yesterday. But you're saying.
Check in with Jason before you leave.
Day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I might, the one thing I know they're doing is working to create effectively what someone had asked for at the meeting, of a true working group that has membership of all the parties with actual say, as opposed to just advisory and then just blow you off and forget what you said. And so I understand that that's been one of the points that they're really looking at, that's moving people. And I don't know if it will be sufficient to move people, but that's the hot spot.
Thank you. Yeah, Austin and Susan.
I'm just wondering how, this is this classic sort of Open Meetings Act problem or whatever, but I'm sure we would all like to hear an update from Jason. And so how do we shouldn't all walk up to his office and ask him to tell us the same story. So how? So
I was going to, based on what Meg just said, I was going to text Jason, hey, do you have an update? And is it something you can share with everyone? Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Yep.
Thanks, Meg.
It might not be something he can share with everyone. I'll just put that out there. Might not be. Go ahead.
Thanks. So yesterday, Bill Falsey had mentioned that he'd not received any additional questions, and was wondering if members were going to be asking more questions. And I know that some of the information, just even about design criteria, peer review, all that I had asked for. I have a stack of it. It's going to be electronically available, and I know
Have they shared that?
they're going to share that piece of it. And I know from also, Cameron, the conversations I had yesterday have helped to expand my understanding of user group to just beyond the commercial interests, you know, to include the Red Cross, the pilots, the military, FEMA, Coast Guard. And so I think even taking a look at public policy in terms of who the stakeholders are as pertaining to this particular, you know, decision helps me to shift my view, I guess, as well.
Good.
So hopefully some of that will be forthcoming in those emails as well.
Thanks for that prompt, because I've sent some questions, but if I want to make sure I get them all done, I can get them in. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So we have to wrap up here. Does anyone have committee updates that they want to bring to the table? If so, we should extend the meeting
I'd like
for a little
a
bit.
full homeless committee update.
Yeah, Chris.
My question is before that, and it's really kind of in line with what Quinn Davidson just suggested about open meetings and rules. And I don't know if it's proper or legal for us to discuss open public hearings in this venue without having made a notice that we would be discussing those items, because that's very specific. And while I'm happy we had that talk, I just don't know if this is quite an acceptable practice, because we're generally speaking about engagements, we're working on things, trying to get ourselves in order. And so I think it's some advice on how we engage in these conversations would be in order, maybe at our next meeting.
Sure, and I don't know if Barbara has advice right now on this question.
Could you please ask me the question one more time?
Yeah, Barbara, the chair, I would reframe the question slightly. Is it really within the rules for us to be discussing public hearing items that are open and active public hearings scheduled for debate without having them on notice at this meeting?
Well, I think that I would kind of say it depends. I mean, it to some degree, what I've heard has been procedural. So procedural matters you certainly can discuss. I think your agenda notice is fairly broad. And so to that extent, yes. If you're actually debating one of those public hearing items, I think I would say that would be inappropriate. So that would be one thing. And I'm sure Dean will have something to say. On a second matter, I did want to let you know that although the Open Meetings Act does apply to you speaking to each other, it doesn't, the mayor's office isn't covered by the Open Meetings Act. So remember, the mayor can meet and lobby with all of you actually individually. That's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. It's a violation for 4 of you to meet with the mayor and do that.
The mayor and his staff.
That is correct. So I'm going to turn that over to Dean and let Dean correct or add anything to my comments.
Should I move to extend the meeting by 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's do that really quick. Actually, Dean.
Or 10,
go ahead.
or what do you want to do?
Let's do 10. Just in
Move
case.
to extend the meeting by 10 minutes.
Okay. Any opposition? Okay, go ahead.
I agree with what Mr. Jones said. I think the distinction is, if it's a public hearing item we're talking about it here, it's just procedurally, like we talked about more than instance of constitution, just introduce what you said, what it is, what it does. If you start debating the pros and cons of this ordinance, then that's where you're crossing the line. I think you're just procedurally saying what it is and what you expect to do, which comments might go to. That's okay, but those things go.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yeah, Kristen County.
It would just be nice if somebody could kind of draft up a little guidance to that effect that we could include with the committee description so that we are all clear with the guidance of what policy we should be adhering to.
Yes, that's me. I have actually a project right now to draft some guidance on meetings. I will have.
Thank you.
Cameron?
I just want to make sure I was clear that my question was definitely a procedural question in terms of the flow of communication. And so that I have no intention of debating the issue in any way, but just understanding between now and Tuesday how information was going to flow to help to inform the decision then. And so
And I wasn't pointing at anyone.
Yeah.
This
No,
is-
I wanted just, not to you, I wanted to clarify my question. So.
Good order.
I will say that Tuesday night about the contracts with a controlling signature on all, that's not a public hearing. I will actually accept that the Assembly decided to make it one instead of how to be a public hearing.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks, Felix. Dean, as far as the AM, and procedurally, if we wanted to make any findings or comments pertaining to that contract in AM, what would be the mechanisms for doing that? Because we can't add a whereas, or we can't amend it, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The AEM is basically the Assembly administration statement about this contract. Is the Assembly's always approved. You're like, do you want to make statements about what you expect? I think you could do it either by resolution or by an AEM of your own pertaining to that item, to that contract.
Okay. Which we would lay on the table, and the body would vote to accept or approve, depending on what it is.
That's more of a question.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, anything else before I turn it over to audience? Yeah.
I was just going to quickly say thank you for doing this. It's so helpful to be able to have this opportunity to talk about what we're working on. Every time we do this, I'm so glad we're doing it.
Me too. All right. Go ahead, Eugene.
Can you extend one more minute? It's 1:38.
We extended it for 10 minutes, so we're fine.
Well, it's now 1:39.
Just go ahead.
My name is Eugene Carhaven. I represent myself, follow the public process. When the public process is an appropriate decision made by the governing body is more like a public interest. I appreciate the question by Senator and the constant for the end of the meeting. This agenda is not specific. The public wouldn't know what you're going to be really discussing. This is not the way to go. You can pretend this is not happening, but you can't pretend that this is what's happening by this worded document that's not out there for the public. You have to come to the meeting, and then you see, you hand it out, the public doesn't have any clue, and you go for a bet. Oh, maybe you're going to discuss this or that, and that's not the way to go. Now, I'll just close with this comment because it's on subject, because you discussed the subject. A meeting on Tuesday, in dealing with the port. Now, you have place for public comment afterwards. There's no public hearing. Public hearing's closed. But what I witnessed when you closed public hearing last Tuesday night on that item, you created a situation where the administration came in and give us time to respond. Well, then, how can the public respond to what the administration says? You're allowing for that opportunity, but you close the opportunity for the public. How do you correct that situation? Because you're also, in fairness, you got a time-sensitive date there that you discussed very thoroughly, that if you don't deal with it and you wait, and how you can do reconsideration and all that kind of stuff. So I'll just leave it at this. It doesn't look like you're really connecting with the people, and you're going to have a lot more people upset with whatever you do, because they're going to realize is, hey, we didn't have a chance at that meeting to speak. You've got public comment coming after you make a decision on that issue or anticipation, but you don't allow any public comment. And then last, on the same thing, even if you allow public comment and amend it, it's not advertised that you are allowing it, because the agenda is specifically saying you're not allowing public comment on that issue, because you're going to discuss the issue, decide the issue was like that night, and then you have public comment. Thank you very much. With approximately 49 seconds to spare.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to participate? All right. Go ahead, Chris.
I would just ask to extend the meeting by 1 minute, please, and make that motion. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition? Seeing none, go ahead.
What is the?
You said you were coming down.
Oh, okay. I will just say that as kind of part of what we talked about Tuesday night is the Assembly wanted the administration and the user group to spend the week kind of thinking about the memorandum and kind of how we could get everyone, or at least some of the user group, on board with what on board with PCT. We are we've had some of those conversations, and we're going to continue to have them until Tuesday. So I don't really have a hard update other than saying we're talking and we're trying to figure out if we can get some consensus and some alignment on what we want to do.
Okay, Forrest.
Yeah, Jason, you might not be able to answer this quickly, but when I was talking to Steve Rebuffalo and some other folks last week about this question of alignment, he pointed out that to a certain degree it's impossible to get full alignment on some of these things because ultimately the user group's goals are different than our goals. Like we need to create what's essentially a public utility and sort of really broad swath of people. They're trying to maximize profits. That's what they're doing. And if they can maximize profits on the existing platform as long as possible, and then it were to collapse, they could all go by rail or whatever and raise their prices, where we would, not have that public utility. So, have you run into that kind of irreducible problem at all, or do you think that we can get to a point where we do have alignment?
Well, you make a very good point, and I think that on Steve's point.
Steve makes a very good point.
I think that that is a point that we are trying to figure out how do we bridge, because I think ultimately there are some decisions that Steve is right, that I think we as the municipality just have different goals than what the user group would have. That's not to say that we can't, I think, find alignment on some of the issues that we're facing, but sure, yeah, I think there will be a few that we probably run into those types of situations.
At least 20 minutes out there. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for coming down.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I'll adjourn.